The massive black wolf collapsed at her doorstep with 3 silver arrows buried in his chest, and even half dead, his eyes held the same burning gold she'd run from 5 years ago. Ilara's lantern slipped from her fingers. Glass shattered against the frozen porch boards, kerosene hissing into the snow. No. The wind screamed through the pines, driving ice crystals into her face like tiny knives. She stood paralyzed in her doorway while the storm tried to tear the cabin apart around her, staring at the impossible creature bleeding out on her threshold. She knew that wolf. She'd know him anywhere, in any form, in any lifetime. The sheer size of him, easily twice a normal alpha. The midnight fur that swallowed light. The jagged scar running across his left flank from a hunting accident when he was 19. Cale Blackwood. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories. Her mate. The mate she'd abandoned on the night of their mating ceremony without a single word of explanation. His massive chest heaved once, twice. Blood, so much blood, pooled beneath him, steaming where it met the snow. The silver arrow shafts caught what little moonlight broke through the storm clouds, gleaming like accusations. Let him die. The thought came cold and clear. She could step back inside. Close the door. By morning, he'd be nothing but a frozen corpse, and she could disappear again. Find another remote territory. Build another life under another false name. No one would ever know she'd been here. No one would ever connect the rogue healer called Mira to Ilara Vance, the woman who'd humiliated the most powerful alpha on the continent. His eyes opened. Gold fire blazed up at her through the driving snow, dimming, fading, but still seeing her. Still knowing her, even as death crept closer with every sluggish heartbeat. His mouth opened. A sound emerged that might have been her name. Then his eyes rolled back, and he went still. Damn you, Ilara whispered. Damn you, damn you, damn you. She was already moving. Her healer's bag hung by the door where it always did, habit ingrained through 5 years of midnight emergencies and desperate house calls. She grabbed it, then seized his front legs and pulled. 300 pounds of unconscious wolf. She was strong for an Omega, but this was impossible. The wind fought her. The ice fought her. Her own screaming instincts fought her. She got him inside anyway. The cabin was small, one room with a wood stove, a bed, a table, a lifetime of solitude carefully arranged. Cale's wolf form took up half the floor. Blood immediately began soaking into the worn floorboards she'd scrubbed just that morning. Ilara slammed the door against the storm and dropped to her knees beside him. The arrows first. Silver poisoning would kill him faster than blood loss. She'd seen wolves survive wounds that would fell a grizzly bear, but silver was different. Silver was corruption. Silver was rot. It turned their own healing abilities against them, made their bodies attack themselves. She ripped open her bag. Forceps. Antiseptic. The small jar of wolfsbane salve she kept for exactly this purpose, just enough to counteract silver, not enough to poison. This is going to hurt, she told his unconscious form. I hope it hurts a lot. She meant it. She also meant the steady hand she placed on the first arrow, and the careful, measured pressure she used to extract it without tearing more tissue. Healer's oath. The words her grandmother had made her swear when she was 7 years old, too young to understand what they meant. You don't choose who lives. You don't choose who dies. You just do the work. The first arrow came free with a wet, sucking sound. Ilara dropped it into a bowl and moved to the second. Cale's wolf whimpered. A small, broken sound that had no business coming from the most feared alpha in 7 territories. Don't you dare make me feel sorry for you, she muttered. The second arrow was deeper. She had to dig for it, her fingers slick with blood, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. When it finally pulled loose, Cale's whole body spasmed. And shifted. Fur rippled into skin. Bones cracked and reformed. The massive wolf shrank and twisted and became a man. Naked, bloody, and so heartbreakingly familiar that Alara had to close her eyes against the sudden burn of tears. Don't look at him. Don't see him. Just do the work. She opened her eyes and looked anyway. 5 years had changed him. His dark hair was longer, brushing his shoulders. New scars mapped his torso, a particularly vicious one curling around his ribs that looked like claw marks. The hard planes of his face had sharpened, any remaining softness carved away by whatever he'd survived since she left. But his hands were the same. Large, capable hands with long fingers that had once traced her face like she was something precious. Hands that had trembled when he'd placed his grandmother's ring on her finger. Hands that were currently covered in his own blood because someone had shot him with silver arrows and left him to die in a storm. Who did this to you? The question rose before she could stop it. She shoved it down. Not her concern. Not her problem. She'd extract the third arrow, stop the bleeding, and then... Then what? The third arrow was the worst. It had punched through his chest at an angle, missing his heart by inches, maybe less. The silver had already started its corruption, black veins spreading outward from the wound like poison ivy across marble. Alara worked for an hour. 2. The storm raged outside while she stitched and cleaned and applied salve with hands that stayed steady through sheer force of will. She'd treated worse wounds before. She'd saved wolves who should have been dead 10 times over. She'd never treated anyone whose every breath felt like a knife in her own chest. When she finally sat back on her heels, dawn was creeping gray and grudging through the cabin's single window. The storm had died to a sullen mutter. Kale lay on her floor. Cleaned, bandaged, still unconscious but breathing, and Alara realized she had a very serious problem. He was going to wake up. And when he did, he was going to want answers she couldn't give him. Wouldn't give him. 5 years ago, she'd had her reasons for running. Those reasons hadn't changed. If anything, they'd gotten more dangerous. She could still leave. Pack a bag, disappear into the morning, be 3 territories away before he opened his eyes. But she knew Cale Blackwood. She'd known him since they were children, had watched him grow from a wild, laughing boy into the kind of alpha who made other alphas kneel just by walking into a room. He'd never stopped looking for her. The rumors reached even here, in this forgotten corner of nowhere. The Alpha King's obsession with his vanished bride. The fortune he'd spent on trackers. The alliances he'd broken when other packs refused to help him search. If she ran now, he'd know she'd been here. He'd know she'd saved him. And he'd hunt her to the ends of the earth with the absolute certainty that she still cared enough to keep him alive. Better to end it here. Better to make him hate me enough to let me go. The wolfsbane grew wild behind her cabin. She'd cultivated it carefully, knowing she might need it someday. Not to kill, never to kill, but to restrain. To buy time. Her hands shook as she brewed the solution. Her eyes burned. But she kept working because that's what she did. That's what she'd always done. The work didn't care about her feelings. The work just needed to be done. An hour later, Cale Blackwood lay chained to her bed with wolfsbane-laced restraints around his wrists and ankles. The iron was old but solid, salvaged from a hunting trap she'd found rusted in the woods 3 winters ago. The wolfsbane would keep him weak enough that even an alpha king couldn't break free. Probably. Alara sat in her single chair, pulled up beside the bed, and waited. The morning light strengthened. Cale's breathing steadied. The black veins around his wounds began to fade as the salve did its work and his own healing finally kicked in. He was going to live. Because she'd saved him. Because 5 years of running and hiding and pretending to be someone else hadn't been enough to kill the part of her that would always, always choose him. She hated herself for it. Around noon, he stirred. His brow furrowed. His fingers flexed against the chains. And then his eyes opened, those impossible gold eyes that had haunted every dream she'd had since the night she'd climbed out her window and fled into the darkness. He stared at her. She stared back. Alara. her name in his voice. A rasp, barely human, rough with pain and silver poisoning and something else. Something that sounded almost like wonder. "You're alive." Of course he'd thought she was dead. What other explanation could there be for a mate who vanished without a trace? The bond between them should have let him feel her across any distance, but she'd learned how to block it. Another secret. Another betrayal. "I'm alive," she confirmed. Flat. Cold. Giving him nothing. He tried to move. The chains caught him. For a moment, confusion flickered across his features, and then his expression went hard. "Wolfsbane. Yes. You chained me. Also yes." His jaw tightened. The muscle there jumped once, twice. She'd seen that tell 1,000 times before, in 100 arguments. He was furious. He was also in tremendous pain, still half poisoned, and completely at her mercy. The Alpha King, helpless in her tiny cabin. The irony would have been funny if it didn't make her want to scream. "Someone tried to kill you," she said, before he could ask the questions she couldn't answer. 3 silver arrows. You would have died if you hadn't made it to my door. Do you remember who shot you?" His golden eyes never left her face. "I remember running. I remember the storm. I remember," he stopped. Swallowed. "I remember your face. Looking down at me. You were unconscious. I thought I was dreaming. I've dreamed about finding you so many times." His voice cracked on the words, and something cracked in her chest right along with it. 5 years, Elara. 5 years, and I never stopped. Don't. The word came out sharp enough to cut. Don't say it. Don't act like this is some kind of reunion. You're alive because I have a healer's oath, not because I wanted to save you. As soon as you're well enough to travel, you're going to leave. And you're never going to come back. Silence stretched between them. When he finally spoke again, his voice had gone quiet. Dangerous. The voice of an Alpha King who had learned, in the years since she'd known him, exactly how to make people afraid. "No. No. I've spent 5 years searching for you. 5 years wondering if you were dead in a ditch somewhere, or enslaved by rogues, or suffering in ways I couldn't imagine. 5 years destroying myself trying to find you." He pulled against the chains, not hard, just testing. His eyes never wavered. "I'm not leaving until you tell me why you ran. And Elara? These chains won't hold me forever." She knew that. She also knew that the reason she'd run, the secret she'd guarded with her life for 5 years, was stirring awake in the hidden cellar beneath the cabin floor. And if Cale discovered the truth about what she'd been protecting all this time, everything she'd sacrificed would mean nothing. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. The chains held through the night. Barely. Elara sat in her chair by the window, watching the last of the storm clouds break apart over the mountains. She hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt him watching her, those gold eyes burning through the darkness like twin flames. He'd tested the restraints every hour. Not frantically, not with desperation. Methodically. Patiently. Learning exactly how much give the chains had, exactly how the wolfsbane affected his strength, exactly when her attention wavered. He was planning something. She could feel it the way she'd always been able to feel him, that low hum of awareness that 5 years of distance hadn't managed to sever completely. "You haven't eaten." His voice cut through the gray morning light. Elara didn't turn from the window. "Neither have you. Hard to eat when you're chained to a bed. Hard to cook when you're watching your prisoner plan an escape." A sound that might have been a laugh, if it had any warmth in it. Prisoner. Is that what I am? Now she turned. He'd managed to sit up against the headboard sometime in the night, the chains pooling in his lap. The bandages across his chest needed changing. She could see blood seeping through the white gauze, but his color was better. His eyes were clearer. The wolfsbane was wearing off faster than it should. Alpha kings, apparently, metabolized everything faster. You're a complication, she said. One I need to manage until you're well enough to leave. I told you. I'm not leaving. And I told you. You don't have a choice. He smiled then. It wasn't the smile she remembered, that bright, devastating grin that had made her fall for him when she was 16 years old and stupid enough to believe in happy endings. This smile was sharp. Cold. The smile of a man who had learned to weaponize charm. Elara. He said her name like he was tasting it. Do you really think a few chains and some wolfsbane are going to stop me from getting answers? From you, of all people? I think you're weak, wounded, and stuck in a cabin miles from anywhere. I think the people who shot you wanted you dead badly enough to use silver, which means they're not amateurs. And I think if you had anyone you trusted to come rescue you, you'd have called for them already. The smile flickered. Just for a second, but she caught it. Got you. Someone in your inner circle, she continued, pressing the advantage. That's why you were running alone in a storm bad enough to kill even an alpha king. That's why no one's come looking for you. You don't know who tried to kill you, which means you don't know who you can trust. You always were too smart. He said it like an accusation. It was one of the things I loved about you. Don't what? Don't mention that I loved you. Don't acknowledge that we were supposed to spend our lives together. Don't remind you that you left me. His voice rose on the last words, finally cracking through that cold control. I woke up in your bed, Elara. I woke up in your bed, chained with wolfsbane, in a cabin that smells like you, and you're sitting there acting like we're strangers. So don't tell me what I can and can't say. She stood so fast her chair scraped against the floor. You want to talk about what happened? Fine. Let's talk. I left. I ran away in the middle of the night without telling anyone where I was going or why. I humiliated you in front of every alpha in 7 territories, broke our betrothal, and disappeared completely. Those are the facts. What else is there to discuss? Why? He lunged against the chains, hard enough that the bed frame groaned. Why did you leave? We were happy, Elara. We were in love. I would have given you anything. I would have torn apart the world for you. I didn't want the world torn apart. The words exploded out of her before she could stop them. I didn't want, I never asked for. She cut herself off. Pressed her hands against her face. Took a breath that shook more than she wanted it to. Don't let him see. Don't let him know. When she lowered her hands, her voice was steady again. What I wanted doesn't matter. What matters is that you need to leave as soon as you're healed. Go back to your territories, figure out who's trying to kill you, and forget you ever found me. Forget. He repeated the word like it was obscene. You want me to forget? Yes. I've spent 5 years looking for you. Then stop. I can't. The rawness in his voice made her chest ache. Don't you understand? I can't. The bond, even blocked, even after everything, I can feel you. I've always been able to feel you, like a thread tied around my heart. I tried to cut it. Gods know I tried. I drank myself into stupors trying to drown it out. I ran myself ragged on full moons trying to exhaust it. Nothing worked. Nothing ever worked. Elara closed her eyes. She knew. She knew because she'd done the same things, felt the same things, spent 5 years trying to escape a connection that wouldn't let her go. That's not my problem, she made herself say. I'm not responsible for your feelings. No. You're responsible for running away from them. He settled back against the headboard, and when she opened her eyes, his expression had shifted again. Calculating now. Thoughtful. You saved my life. I told you. Healer's oath. Doesn't matter why. You saved me. Which means, under ancient pack law, I owe you a life debt. Something cold slithered down Alara's spine. Don't. A life debt can only be repaid in one of three ways. A life in return. A year of service. Or sanctuary until the debt holder releases the debtor. His gold eyes gleamed. I invoke sanctuary. You can't, that law hasn't been used in centuries. It's never been revoked. Check your grandmother's books if you don't believe me. I saw the shelf by the door, you kept her library. The law is still binding. You're twisting the intent. I'm using it exactly as intended. He leaned forward, chains clinking. Someone in my inner circle wants me dead. Until I know who, Cale Blackwood is officially deceased. Killed in the storm, body never recovered. It's the only way I can investigate without alerting whoever betrayed me. Then go somewhere else. Find a hole to hide, and that isn't my cabin. There is nowhere else. Everyone thinks they know my allies, my safe houses, my escape routes. But no one knew I was looking for you in this direction. I've kept your trail secret for 3 years, ever since I found the first real clue. He smiled again, and this time it was almost the old smile. Almost warm. You hid well, Alara. If I hadn't been obsessive about it, I never would have found this place. You expect me to believe you just happened to collapse at my door? I expect you to believe I've been watching this cabin for 2 weeks, waiting for the right time to approach. The storm changed my plans. The arrows changed them more. His expression darkened. They caught me about 6 miles east. I don't know how they tracked me, maybe they didn't. Maybe they were just hunting rogues in the area and got lucky. But I ran. And this was the only place I could think of that might be safe. The words hit her like physical blows. 2 weeks. He'd been out there for 2 weeks, watching her. Watching her live her quiet little life under her false name, probably planning exactly how he'd confront her. And then someone had shot him with silver arrows, and all those plans had gone to hell. The life debt, she said slowly. You're really invoking it. Yes. You understand what that means. You'd be bound to this cabin. Bound to me. Unable to leave until I release you. I understand. And if I never release you? Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or hope. She couldn't tell anymore. Then I stay forever. There are worse fates. She wanted to scream at him. Wanted to throw something, break something, make him understand that this wasn't a game. That there were reasons. Real, dangerous, important reasons, why she couldn't have him here. But the law was the law. Her grandmother had taught her that before she'd taught her anything else. Pack law wasn't like human law, flexible and open to interpretation. Pack law was absolute. Binding. Unbreakable except by the most extreme circumstances. If Cale invoked sanctuary, she had to grant it. Refusing would mark her as oathbreaker, exile her from what little protection being a healer still afforded her, and make her fair game for any wolf who wanted to claim her territory. Fine, she heard herself say. You can stay. But there are rules. Name them. You don't leave the cabin without my permission. You don't contact anyone from your old life. You don't ask me questions about why I left. She held his gaze, forcing steel into her voice. And you don't go into the cellar. Ever. For any reason. His eyebrows rose. The cellar? Those are my terms. Accept them or invoke a different form of debt repayment. A long pause. She could practically see him thinking, turning over her words, examining them for weaknesses. The mention of the cellar had caught his attention, of course it had. Cale had never been able to resist a mystery. But he was also desperate. Hurt. Hunted. And for all his cold new edges, she knew him. Knew that underneath the Alpha King armor, there was still the boy who'd brought her wildflowers and taught her to dance and promised her forever. Accepted, he said finally. Now take these chains off. Not yet. The wolfsbane needs another few hours to clear your system, and I need to change your bandages. You'll stay restrained until I'm sure you won't do anything stupid. You don't trust me. Should I? He held her gaze for a long moment. No. I suppose not. She got her medical supplies. Changed his bandages in silence, her hands steady and clinical against his skin. He held perfectly still for her, barely breathing, and she tried not to notice how warm he was. How familiar. How right it felt to touch him again after all these years. Stop it. This doesn't change anything. When she finished, she stepped back quickly. Put distance between them. The cabin suddenly felt very small, and the distance felt very inadequate. I'll make food, she said. You need to eat if you want to heal. Elara. She paused at the stove, her back to him. You should know something. His voice had gone quiet again. That dangerous quiet that made her skin prickle. Before you decide how you want to handle this. Whatever this is going to be. What? I never accepted another mate. The words hung in the air. Elara's hands froze over the pot she'd been reaching for. In 5 years, he continued, there were offers. Political matches. Strategic alliances. My council pressured me constantly. An Alpha King needs heirs, they said. Needs a Luna to stand beside him. Needs to move on from the woman who abandoned him. Kale. I refused them all. Every single one. She heard the chains shift as he moved, could feel his eyes on her back like physical pressure. Under wolf law, a betrothal isn't broken until both parties formally dissolve it before witnesses. You ran before we could complete the mating ceremony, but the betrothal was already sealed. Your blood and mine, mixed under the full moon. Remember? She remembered. She remembered everything about that night, the way his eyes had glowed when he'd cut his palm and pressed it to hers, the words he'd spoken, the absolute certainty she'd felt that she was making a terrible mistake. You never dissolved it, she whispered. No. And neither did you. She spun to face him. That doesn't mean anything. I left. I made my intentions clear. You made nothing clear. You vanished. No letter, no explanation, no formal rejection. Just, gone. His voice cracked on the word. I waited, Elara. The first year, I waited, because I thought surely you'd come back. Surely you'd send word. Surely there was some reason, some explanation that would make it all make sense. There was a reason. Then tell me. I can't. Can't or won't? Does it matter? He surged against the chains again, harder this time. The bed frame creaked ominously. It matters because in the eyes of wolf law, you're still my betrothed. It matters because I've spent 5 years in a hell of my own making, refusing to let you go. It matters because... He stopped. Breathed. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. It matters because I still love you. Even after everything. Even knowing you don't want me. I still love you, and I need to understand why. Why you left. Why you're hiding here under a false name. Why you won't look at me for more than a few seconds at a time. His eyes burned into hers. Why you're so terrified of me finding out what's in that cellar. The silence stretched between them like a living thing. Elara could feel her heart pounding against her ribs. Could feel the blocked bond pulsing at the edges of her consciousness, desperate to open, to connect, to bridge the impossible gap between them. She'd kept it closed for 5 years through sheer force of will, and now he was here, chained to her bed, close enough to touch, and the effort of maintaining that wall was almost more than she could bear. You'll have your sanctuary, she said finally. Her voice came out strange. Hollow. You can stay until your debt is repaid or until I release you, whichever comes first. But the rest of it, the questions, the bond, the betrothal, that stays in the past. Where it belongs. And if I don't agree to those terms? Then I invoke my right as debt holder to add conditions. You refuse my conditions, the debt defaults to a year of service instead of sanctuary. And I promise you, Kale, I will find ways to keep you so busy you won't have time to ask questions. A muscle ticked in his jaw. You've changed. So have you. No. He shook his head slowly. I'm exactly the same. Just, harder. Colder. More willing to do what needs to be done. His eyes never left hers. The boy you loved died the night you left him. What's sitting in front of you now is what grew from his grave. The words should have hurt. Maybe they did, somewhere underneath the numbness she'd wrapped around herself like armor. Good, she heard herself say. Then we understand each other. She turned back to the stove and started making breakfast. Behind her, Kale fell silent. The cabin filled with the mundane sounds of cooking, oil sizzling, eggs cracking, bread being sliced. And beneath it all, the steady pulse of a bond that refused to break, no matter how hard they both tried to sever it. She had maybe 3 days before the wolfsbane cleared his system enough for him to break those chains. 3 days to figure out how to keep him away from the cellar. 3 days before everything she'd sacrificed came crashing down. Below her feet, beneath the trapdoor hidden under the worn kitchen rug, she felt the small stirring of consciousness that was her greatest secret. Her greatest sin. The reason she'd run from everything she loved and everyone she knew. Her daughter shifted in her sleep, dreaming wolf dreams, completely unaware that her father was lying wounded in the room above her head. And Alara stood at the stove, making eggs, wondering how long she could keep two worlds from colliding. Chapter 3. The hunters came on the third day. Alara spotted them from the kitchen window, 3 figures on horseback picking their way through the fresh snow, their breath steaming in the cold morning air. Even at a distance, she recognized the insignia on their cloaks. Silver wolves on a black field. Blackwood hunters. Kale's own men. Get down. She was across the cabin in 3 strides, shoving Kale off the chair he'd finally been allowed to occupy. He hit the floor with a grunt of pain, his half-healed wounds protesting the sudden movement. What? You're hunters. 3 of them. Coming up the eastern trail. She dragged him toward the cellar door, her heart hammering against her ribs. You need to hide. Now. He resisted. Of course he did. I should talk to them. If they're my men. Your men who might be working for whoever shot you? Your men who might be here to confirm the kill? She yanked the rug aside, revealing the trapdoor. You said yourself you don't know who betrayed you. Are you willing to bet your life that it wasn't one of them? The logic hit home. She saw it in the tightening of his jaw, the way his golden eyes flickered with reluctant agreement. The cellar, he said. You told me I couldn't go in the cellar. I told you not to go without my permission. I'm giving you permission. She hauled the trapdoor open, trying not to think about what waited below. Stay quiet. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe. He paused at the top of the ladder, one hand gripping the wooden frame. Alara. If something goes wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong. I've been lying to people about who I am for 5 years. 3 hunters aren't going to trip me up now. She practically pushed him down the ladder, then slammed the trapdoor shut and dragged the rug back into place just as hoofbeats sounded in the yard. Please let her be asleep. Please let her stay quiet. Please. A knock at the door. Heavy. Official. Alara took a breath. Smoothed her expression into the vague, slightly nervous mask she'd perfected over years of dealing with wolves who outranked her. Then she opened the door. Good morning, gentlemen. The lead hunter was tall and broad, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow and eyes that swept over her with professional assessment. "Ma'am. I'm Commander Thorne of the Blackwood Guard. We're searching for our Alpha King. His Majesty went missing 3 nights ago during the storm." "The Alpha King?" Elara let her eyebrows rise. "Out here? We're nowhere near Blackwood territory." "We're aware." Thorne's gaze moved past her, scanning what he could see of the cabin's interior. His trail led in this direction before the storm covered it. "We're checking every dwelling within 50 miles. Well, you're welcome to look around, but I haven't seen any strangers. Just me and my patients." She stepped aside, opening the door wider. "I'm a healer. People come to me from all over the region." The second hunter, younger, with nervous eyes, spoke up. "What kind of healer lives this far from anyone?" "The kind who likes her privacy." Elara kept her voice pleasant. Mild, unthreatening. "I treat rogues, mostly. Wolves who can't afford to visit pack healers or who don't want questions asked about how they got hurt. It's not glamorous work, but someone has to do it." Thorne was still scanning the cabin. His nostrils flared slightly, and Elara's heart stuttered. The blood. Can he smell the blood? She'd scrubbed the floors twice, burned the stained rags, changed the bandages outside where the wind would carry the scent away. But an Alpha King's blood was potent. Distinctive. If Thorne had a good nose. "You've had a patient recently." It wasn't a question. 3 days ago. A young wolf from the mining settlement east of here. Got his hand crushed in an accident. The lie came smoothly, a story she'd rehearsed in her head a dozen times. Lost 2 fingers. "I did what I could, but he'll never have full use of that hand again." "And where is this patient now?" "Gone home. His brother came to collect him yesterday morning." Thorne's eyes narrowed. Elara held his gaze, keeping her heartbeat steady through sheer force of will. She'd learned, over the years, how to control her body's responses. How to lie to wolves who could smell fear, hear racing pulses, sense deception in 100 tiny ways. The trick wasn't to eliminate fear. The trick was to redirect it. She let herself think about Kale in the cellar. Let the genuine terror of that situation bleed into her scent, her voice, her posture. Let Thorne read her anxiety as the natural nervousness of a lone Omega faced with 3 armed hunters. "We'll need to search the property," Thorne said finally. "Standard procedure." "Of course." Elara stepped back, gesturing them inside. "I'll put some tea on. It's cold out there." They searched for an hour. The main cabin. The small barn where she kept her supplies. The smokehouse. The woodshed. They poked through her stores of herbs and medicines, examined her patient records, asked questions about everyone who'd visited in the last month. They didn't check the cellar. Why would they? The trapdoor was hidden beneath a rug, and Elara had lived here long enough that her scent saturated every inch of the cabin. Even a wolf's nose would struggle to pick out anything unusual beneath that overwhelming familiarity. When they finally left, satisfied, or at least unable to justify further intrusion, Elara stood on the porch and watched them ride away until they disappeared over the ridge. Then she went inside, locked the door, and collapsed against it with her legs shaking. Too close. That was too close. She gave herself 60 seconds to fall apart. 60 seconds of ragged breathing and trembling hands and the overwhelming urge to scream. Then she pulled herself together, crossed to the trapdoor, and knocked twice. They're gone. The door swung open. Kale climbed out, his face unreadable. And behind him, clutching his hand, came a small girl with wild dark hair and eyes the exact same shade of gold as her father's. Time stopped. Elara saw the moment Kale understood. Saw his gaze drop to the child, then rise to meet hers. Saw 5 years of questions answer themselves in a single, devastating instant. Mama? Lily's voice was small, confused. The man was in my room. He said you said it was okay. It is okay, baby. The words came from somewhere far away. Elara couldn't feel her body. Couldn't feel anything except the awful, crushing weight of a secret finally exposed. Go back downstairs and play with your dolls. Mama needs to talk to the man for a minute. But now, Lily. The sharpness in her voice made the girl flinch. Elara hated herself for it, but she couldn't have this conversation with her daughter watching. Lily retreated down the ladder. The trapdoor closed. And Elara was alone with Kale and the ruins of everything she'd built. She's mine. His voice was barely human. She's mine, isn't she? Elara said nothing. Answer me. He moved toward her, and for the first time since he'd arrived, she was genuinely afraid. Not of violence, Kale would never hurt her, she knew that in her bones, but of the devastation in his eyes. The betrayal. The grief. That child is my daughter. My daughter. And you've been hiding her from me for, how old is she? 4.5. 4 he stopped. Calculated. You were pregnant. When you left. You were pregnant with my child, and you left. I didn't know. The words scraped her throat like broken glass. Not then. I didn't know until 2 months later, when I was already hidden, I didn't know, Kale. But you found out. You found out, and you still didn't come back. You still didn't tell me. He was shaking. She could see it in his hands, in the rigid line of his shoulders. I have a daughter. A daughter who doesn't know me. Who's been raised in hiding, in this cabin in the middle of nowhere. She's been raised safe. Something fierce rose in Elara's chest. She's been raised loved. She's been raised far away from politics and power struggles and people who want to use her as a pawn. People like me? People like everyone. Do you have any idea what would happen if word got out that the Alpha King had an heir? An illegitimate heir, born to a runaway bride? She'd be a target from the moment she took her first breath. Every enemy you have, every rival, every ambitious alpha who thinks they could do better. They'd all want her. Either to control or to eliminate. I could have protected her. Like you protected yourself 3 nights ago. The words were cruel. She knew they were cruel. But she couldn't stop them. You showed up at my door with 3 silver arrows in your chest, Kale. Someone in your own inner circle wants you dead. And you think you could have kept her safe? He flinched like she'd struck him. That's not fair. None of this is fair. It was never going to be fair. She wrapped her arms around herself, holding the pieces together by sheer force of will. I made a choice. Maybe it was the wrong one. Maybe I should have found a way to tell you. But I was 22 years old, pregnant, alone, and terrified. I did what I thought I had to do. Why? The word was raw. Broken. Just tell me why. I deserve that much, Elara. After everything, after her, I deserve to know why you ran. The truth rose in her throat. She could feel it pressing against her teeth, demanding release. 5 years of silence. 5 years of carrying this weight alone. I didn't run because I didn't love you. I ran because your mother threatened to kill my sister. The words were right there. So close. All she had to do was open her mouth. A knock at the door. They both froze. The knock came again, not the heavy, official knock of the hunters, but something lighter. More hesitant. Elara moved to the window. Peered through the frost-covered glass. It's Mrs. Chen from the village, she breathed. Her grandson's been sick. She probably wants more medicine. Kale retreated without being told, slipping back down into the cellar. The trapdoor closed. The rug slid into place. And Elara answered the door with a smile, and spent the next 20 minutes discussing a child's cough while her world crumbled silently around her. The days that followed were a special kind of torture. Cale couldn't stay in the cellar anymore. Lily knew about him now, and keeping them separated would only raise more questions. So they settled into an uneasy routine. Cale slept on a pallet by the fire, Lily in her little room below, Elara in the bed that still smelled faintly of his blood. They didn't talk about the revelation. Didn't talk about much of anything, really, except the practical necessities of survival. Food. Firewood. The progress of his healing. But Elara watched them together. Her daughter and her daughter's father, and felt something crack open in her chest that she'd thought she'd sealed shut years ago. Cale was good with Lily. Better than good. He was patient with her endless questions, gentle with her sudden shyness, endlessly fascinated by every small detail of her existence. He learned her favorite colors, purple and silver, her favorite foods, honey cakes and venison stew, her favorite stories, anything with dragons. He didn't push. Didn't try to claim her or force a bond that hadn't had time to develop naturally. He just was there. Present. Available. The kind of father Elara had always hoped he would be, if things had been different. It made everything harder. Because she still couldn't tell him the truth. Couldn't explain about his mother, about the threat, about the hour she'd been given to disappear. Not while Lily was watching, listening, absorbing everything with those sharp little eyes. And not while she still didn't understand the full picture herself. It was 3 days after the hunter's visit when she found the first clue. Cale had asked her to retrieve some papers from his saddlebags, miraculously recovered from where his horse had fled during the attack. Letters, mostly. Reports from his council. The mundane business of running 7 territories. But tucked between a tax assessment and a border dispute, she found a smaller envelope. Unmarked. Unsealed. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in cramped handwriting she didn't recognize. Your Majesty. The investigation into your mother's death has uncovered disturbing inconsistencies. The healer who attended her final days has disappeared. The medicine she was given has been traced to an unauthorized source. I believe the Queen Mother was murdered. 3 members of your council had motive and opportunity. Lord Vance of the Western March. Commander Thorne of the Royal Guard. Lady Gideon of the Treasury. I dare not commit more to paper. We must speak in person. Your servant. M. Elara read the letter 3 times. Then she read it again. The Queen Mother was murdered. Cale's mother. The woman who had stood in Elara's chamber on the morning of the mating ceremony and promised to kill her sister if she didn't disappear. The woman whose threat had sent Elara running into the night, pregnant and alone. That woman was dead. Murdered. And the killer might be the same person who had put 3 silver arrows in Cale's chest. You found it. She spun. Cale stood in the doorway, his face carefully blank. You left this where I would find it, she said slowly. You wanted me to see. I wanted you to understand. He crossed to her, took the letter from her nerveless fingers. My mother died 2 years ago. The official story was grief. That she never recovered from my humiliation, from losing the daughter-in-law she'd been so excited to welcome. The court physician said her heart simply gave out. But you don't believe that. I didn't. I had my suspicions, but no proof. Then I received this letter, and I started investigating in earnest. He folded the paper carefully. Someone killed my mother. Someone tried to kill me. And I think. He stopped. Something flickered across his face. You think what? I think my mother knew something. Something that made her dangerous. His golden eyes met hers. She changed, in the months after you left. Became paranoid. Secretive. She started investigating something, I never knew what. And then she died, and everyone said it was grief, and I was too broken myself to push harder. Elara's hands were trembling. She clasped them together, trying to still the shaking. Cale. Whatever you're hiding. His voice was soft now. Almost gentle. Whatever secret you've been carrying for 5 years. I think it's connected. I think my mother knew something that got her killed, and I think that something has to do with you. She should tell him. She knew she should tell him. But the words wouldn't come. 5 years of silence had turned them to stone in her throat. Your mother, she started. Another knock at the door. This one urgent. Frantic. Elara moved to the window, and her blood turned to ice. It was Mrs. Chen again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood half a dozen villagers, their faces pale and frightened. And among them, she saw the glint of silver weapons. Mira. Mrs. Chen's voice carried through the door. Mira, you have to let us in. The Blackwood hunters are coming back. They found something in the pass, blood, they say, and the tracks of a large wolf. They think, her voice cracked. They think you're hiding the Alpha King's killer. They're going to search the cabin again. They're going to search everything. Elara met Kale's eyes. 3 suspects. 1 killer. And time had just run out. Get Lily, she said quietly. We need to run. No. His jaw set in that stubborn line she remembered so well. No more running. Not this time. He moved toward the door. It's time to find out who wants me dead, and why my mother had to die to keep their secret. Chapter 4. The name hit Elara like a physical blow. Tyron. Kale's voice was hollow. Empty. My brother. They stood in the ruins of their brief sanctuary, the cabin that had been her home for 5 years, now a temporary fortress against the approaching hunters. Mrs. Chen and the villagers had scattered at Kale's command, sent to hide in the mines until the danger passed. Only the 3 of them remained, Kale, Elara, and Lily, who clutched her mother's hand with white-knuckled terror. The letter mentioned 3 suspects, Elara said carefully. Lord Vance. Commander Thorne. Lady Gideon. Your brother wasn't. Because I never suspected him. Kale laughed, and the sound was terrible. He's my brother. My baby brother, who I taught to hunt, who I protected from our father's rages, who cried at my shoulder when our mother, he stopped. Pressed his hands against his face. When our mother supposedly died of grief. You couldn't have known. I should have known. The signs were there. Tyron's sudden influence in court. The way council members started deferring to him instead of me. The rumors about my fitness to rule, spreading just slowly enough to seem organic. He dropped his hands, and his eyes were burning gold. He's been positioning himself for years. And I was so obsessed with finding you that I missed all of it. Through the window, Elara could see torches flickering on the ridge. The hunters were less than an hour away. Maybe less, if they pushed their horses. We need to move, she said. There's a passage through the root cellar that leads to an old mine shaft. I can get us to the Northern Territory before dawn. And then what? Keep running? Keep hiding? Kale shook his head. No. This ends tonight. You can barely stand. The silver poisoning will slow me down. It won't stop me. He crossed to where she stood, and for the first time since he'd discovered Lily, he touched her. Just his hand on her arm, gentle and warm. Elara. Before this goes any further, I need to know the whole truth. Why you really left. She looked down at Lily, who was watching them both with wide, frightened eyes. Her daughter. Their daughter. Who deserved better than to die in this cabin because her mother couldn't outrun the past. Lily, baby. Elara knelt, cupping her daughter's face in her hands. I need you to go to your room and pack your special bag. The one we practiced with, remember? The one for emergencies. But Mama. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I need you to be brave for me, just for a little while. Can you do that? Lily's lower lip trembled, but she nodded. She was so brave, this child. So much braver than Alara had ever been. I'll come get you soon. I promise. She watched her daughter disappear down the cellar ladder, then turned to face the man she'd loved since she was 16 years old. Your mother came to my chamber the morning of our ceremony. Kale went very still. She said, Alara's voice cracked. She forced herself to continue. She said that if I went through with the mating, she would have my sister killed. Marin was 12 years old, Kale. 12. Living with our aunt in the eastern settlements, completely unprotected. Your mother had hunters positioned within a day's ride. She showed me the orders, already signed and sealed. All she had to do was send the word. No. The denial was automatic. Reflexive. My mother loved you. She was thrilled about the match. She was terrified of it. The truth poured out now, unstoppable after 5 years of silence. She told me things that morning. About my bloodline. About who my real parents were. I always thought I was nobody. An orphan healer's apprentice with a talent for medicine. But she knew different. She'd been investigating my background for months, ever since you announced our engagement. Your background? My mother wasn't a wandering healer who died in childbirth. She was Serena Ashford. The name landed like a thunderclap. Even Alara could see the shock ripple across Kale's face. The Ashford massacre, he breathed. 23 years ago. The entire bloodline wiped out in a single night. Not the entire bloodline. My mother escaped. She was pregnant when the attack came, pregnant with me. She ran, hid, gave birth in secret, and then, Alara swallowed hard. Then she died. From complications, from exhaustion, from a broken heart. I don't know. The healer who took me in never told me the truth. Maybe she didn't know either. But my mother knew. Your mother figured it out. The Ashford wolves were strong, Kale. Stronger than any bloodline in generations. There were rumors they carried the old blood, pure alpha lineage going back centuries. If I mated with you, if we had children. She gestured helplessly. Your mother was afraid. Afraid our children would be too powerful. Afraid they'd threaten her own bloodline's hold on the throne. So she threatened to kill your sister to make you disappear. She gave me 1 hour. 1 hour to pack a bag and vanish, or Marin would die before sunset. Tears were streaming down Alara's face now, but she couldn't stop them. Couldn't stop any of it. I wanted to tell you. I wanted to warn you. But she had people watching. She said if I tried to contact you, if I left any kind of message, the order would go out immediately. So I ran. I ran, and I hid, and I've been hiding ever since. Kale stood frozen. His face had gone pale beneath his tan, and she could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. 5 years, he said finally. 5 years I spent hating you. Hating myself. Wondering what I did wrong, what I could have done differently. And all that time, my own mother. She was trying to protect her family. Her legacy. I don't think she was evil, Kale. I think she was afraid. She destroyed us. His voice shattered on the words. She looked me in the eye every day for 3 years after you left, watched me tear myself apart with grief and guilt, and she never said a word. She let me believe you abandoned me because you didn't love me. She paid for it. Alara thought of the letter, the cramped handwriting, the terrible revelation. Someone killed her. And now I think Tyron must have discovered what she did. Maybe she threatened to expose him. Maybe she finally grew a conscience and decided to tell you the truth. Either way, she became a liability. So he removed her. Kale's hands clenched into fists. Just like he tried to remove me. The torches on the ridge were closer now. Alara could count individual figures, 8, maybe 10 hunters, plus whoever Tyron had sent to lead them. "We're out of time," she said quietly. "I know." He turned to face the window, his shoulders squared despite the pain she knew was still coursing through his silver-damaged body. "Get Lily. Take the passage to the mine shaft. I'll hold them here as long as I can." "No. Elara. No." She moved to stand beside him, her own hands curling into fists. "I spent 5 years running. 5 years hiding. 5 years letting fear dictate every choice I made. I'm done. You have a daughter to protect. I have a mate to protect." The word came out before she could stop it. Before she could second-guess it. "The bond never broke, Kale. I blocked it, but I couldn't sever it. You're still mine, and I'm still yours, and I'm not letting your brother take you from me again." Something flared in his golden eyes. Something that looked terribly like hope. "You can't fight hunters. You're a healer, not a warrior. And you," he hesitated. "You've never shifted. In all the time I knew you, you never once took wolf form." "I can't." The admission hurt, as it always did. "The healers who raised me said my wolf was dormant. Maybe damaged by whatever happened to my mother during her escape. I've tried everything, moon rituals, forced shifts, even silver exposure. Nothing works. I'm wolf enough to feel the bond, to sense other shifters, but not wolf enough to transform." "Then you definitely can't fight. Watch me." She grabbed the hunting bow from its place by the door. A weapon she'd learned to use out of necessity, defending her cabin from rogues and predators. She wasn't as fast as a wolf, as strong as an alpha. But she was accurate. And she was absolutely done being afraid. "Elara." Kale caught her arm, turned her to face him. "If we're going to do this, if we're going to stand and fight together, I need you to open the bond." Her heart stuttered. "What?" "Open it. Let me feel you again." His voice dropped, rough with emotion. 5 years of silence. 5 years of reaching across that connection and finding nothing but emptiness. "If I'm going to die tonight, I want to die with my mate's heartbeat in my chest." The torches were so close now. Maybe 5 minutes until the hunters reached the cabin. Elara closed her eyes. The bond lived in the space behind her heart, a thread of golden light she'd kept wrapped in darkness for half a decade. She'd built walls around it. Trenches. Fortifications. Anything to keep from feeling him, from longing for him, from breaking under the weight of what she'd lost. Now she reached for those walls. And one by one, she tore them down. Light flooded through her. Warmth. A presence so familiar it made her gasp, Kale's consciousness brushing against hers, tentative at first, then rushing in like water through a broken dam. She felt his pain, his grief, his terrible desperate hope. She felt 5 years of loneliness echoing her own. She felt love. Battered and bruised but somehow still alive, still burning, still there. Elara. His voice in her mind, after so long. "You're still here. You're still mine. Always." The word rose up without conscious thought. "I never stopped being yours." He kissed her. It wasn't the gentle, reverent kiss of their courtship. It was desperate. Hungry. A claiming and a surrender all at once. His hands fisted in her hair and her fingers dug into his shoulders, and for one perfect moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. A howl split the night. They broke apart. Through the window, Elara could see wolves pouring over the ridge, not just hunters now, but shifted wolves, running in formation toward the cabin. And at their head, a massive gray wolf with a silver streak running through his fur. "Tyron," Kale growled. "Mama?" Elara spun. Lily stood at the cellar entrance, her emergency bag clutched to her chest, her golden eyes huge with terror. "Baby, I told you to stay." The door exploded inward. Hunters poured through, 3, 4, 5 of them, swords drawn and teeth bared. Kale shifted mid-lunge, his wounded body transforming into the massive black wolf she'd pulled from the snow, and then the cabin descended into chaos. Elara grabbed Lily and ran. Not away, there was nowhere to run, the hunters were everywhere. But toward the corner where she'd hidden the hunting bow. She shoved Lily behind a overturned table, knocked an arrow, and fired. The first hunter went down with a shaft through his shoulder. The second ducked, came up snarling, and lunged for her. Kale intercepted him. Black fur and gray tangled together, teeth flashing, blood spraying across the cabin walls. Even weakened by silver, even fighting through pain, the Alpha King was devastating. 2 hunters fell. Then 3. But more kept coming. And then Tyron stepped through the shattered doorway. He'd shifted back to human form, a tactical choice, Elara realized, meant to make his betrayal personal. To let his brothers see his face as he delivered the killing blow. "Hello, brother." Tyron's voice was pleasant. Almost warm. "You're looking rough." Kale's wolf snarled, positioning himself between Tyron and Elara. 5 years I waited. Tyron stepped closer, casual and confident. 5 years I built my network, cultivated my allies, positioned myself as the stable alternative to the heartbroken king who couldn't move on from his runaway bride. And then you had to go and find her. Had to ruin everything, just like you always ruin everything. You killed our mother. Kale's voice emerged rough and half-human from his wolf's throat. She was going to tell you everything. About your precious Elara's bloodline. About the real reason she ran. She actually grew a conscience in her old age, can you imagine? Tyron laughed. I couldn't let that happen. Not when I was so close. So you poisoned her. A slow-acting agent. Untraceable, or so I thought. She died peacefully, at least. More than she deserved, after what she did to you. He tilted his head. Though I suppose I should thank her. If she hadn't driven your mate away, you might have actually been strong enough to stop me. Kale lunged. Tyron was ready. He sidestepped, drawing a blade that gleamed silver in the firelight, and slashed across Kale's flank. The Alpha King howled, a sound of pure agony as the silver bit into flesh that had barely begun to heal from the arrows. No. Elara released an arrow, but Tyron batted it aside like an insect. The healer. His eyes found her, cold and assessing. The lost Ashford princess. You know, I considered letting you live. Having Ashford blood in the royal line could be useful. But you've proven to be more trouble than you're worth. He raised the silver blade. Lily screamed. And something inside Elara broke. It started in her chest, a pressure, a heat, an expanding force that felt like a star being born in her ribcage. Pain lanced through her, but it wasn't the pain of injury. It was the pain of becoming. Of transformation. Of a door that had been locked for 23 years finally swinging open. She felt her bones shift. Felt her skin ripple. Felt power. Raw, ancient, overwhelming power, surged through her like lightning through a copper wire. The wolf that exploded out of her was white as snow and twice the size of any wolf in the room. Tyron's eyes went wide. Impossible. She hit him like an avalanche. Later, she wouldn't remember the details. Wouldn't remember the taste of blood or the crunch of bone or the screams of hunters fleeing from something they couldn't comprehend. She would only remember the feeling. The absolute, crystalline certainty of finally being whole. When it was over, Tyron lay broken at her feet. When it was over, the hunters were gone, fled or dead, she didn't care which. When it was over, she stood in the ruins of her cabin, her white fur matted with blood, and felt her mate's consciousness wrap around hers like a homecoming. You're magnificent, Kale's voice whispered through the bond. You're absolutely magnificent. She shifted back slowly, the transformation easier than she'd ever imagined, and found herself kneeling in the debris with Lily clutched against her chest and Kale's human hand reaching for her own. It's over, she breathed. But looking at the body of Cale's brother, looking at the destruction around them, she knew that wasn't quite true. It wasn't over. It was only beginning. Chapter 5. The journey to Blackwood territory took 3 days. They traveled slowly, carefully, keeping to the forgotten paths that wound through the mountain passes. Cale's wounds were healing, but silver damage lingered, leaving him weaker than he'd ever admit. Elara stayed close, her newly awakened senses alert to every rustle in the underbrush, every shift in the wind. Lily rode on her father's back when he was in wolf form, her small fingers buried in his black fur. She'd accepted him with the easy resilience of children, this stranger who was suddenly her papa, this upheaval that had torn apart the only home she'd ever known. Elara watched them together and felt her heart crack open a little wider each time. They'd buried what remained of Tyron in an unmarked grave. Elara had wanted to leave him for the crows, but Cale had insisted. He was still my brother, he'd said quietly, standing over the body. Whatever he became, he was still my blood. She hadn't argued. There was grief in his voice that she couldn't touch, couldn't heal. Some wounds had to close on their own. On the second night, camped in a shallow cave while snow fell softly outside, Cale finally asked the question she'd been dreading. The white wolf. He sat across the fire from her, Lily asleep between them. Do you understand what it means? I know it's rare. Rare. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. There hasn't been a white wolf in 7 generations. The last one was Luna Ashford herself, the founder of your bloodline. The histories say she could call the moon down from the sky. Elara looked at her hands. They looked the same as they always had, healer's hands, capable and scarred. But she could feel the power coiled beneath her skin now, sleeping but present. Waiting. I don't know how to be that person, she admitted. I've spent my whole life believing I was ordinary. Broken, even. A wolf who couldn't shift. You were never ordinary. You were never broken. Cale's voice was fierce. You were waiting. For the right moment. For the right reason. For you mean? For your daughter. For your mate. For something worth fighting for. He reached across the fire, and she took his hand without thinking. The bond hummed between them, warm and steady. My mother saw it. That's why she was afraid. Not because you were weak, but because you were strong. Stronger than she could control. The fire crackled. Outside, the snow fell. What happens when we reach Blackwood? Elara asked. We take back what's mine. What's ours? His golden eyes gleamed in the firelight. Tyron had allies. Council members who supported his claim, who believed his lies about my fitness to rule. They'll need to be dealt with. Dealt with how? That depends on them. Those who were deceived can be forgiven. Those who knew the truth. His jaw tightened. Those will face justice. And me? What happens to me? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. You walk into that throne room beside me. You stand before every wolf who ever whispered about you, every courtier who called you faithless and coward and worse. And you show them exactly who you are. His hand tightened on hers. Not my runaway bride. My Luna Queen. The title sent a shiver down her spine. I don't know how to be a queen, Cale. Neither did I, when my father died. I was 22 years old, terrified, completely unprepared. But I learned. You'll learn too. He lifted her hand to his lips. And I'll be beside you. Every step. They reached Blackwood on the morning of the 3rd day. The territory sprawled across the foothills like a kingdom from a fairy tale, stone walls and timber halls, smoke rising from 100 chimneys, wolves going about their daily lives with no idea that their world was about to shatter. Cale had sent word ahead through channels only he knew. Loyal wolves. Secret allies. By the time they walked through the main gates, a crowd had already gathered. Elara felt their eyes on her like physical weight. 5 years of rumors. 5 years of speculation. The woman who'd humiliated their king, who'd vanished without explanation, who'd become a cautionary tale whispered to young wolves about the dangers of faithless mates. Now she walked beside that same king, her head high, her daughter's hand in hers, and let them stare. Let them see who I really am. The throne room was exactly as she remembered, vast and vaulted, with ancient banners hanging from the rafters and a dais at the far end where 2 thrones stood side by side. The Alpha's seat was carved from black oak, massive and imposing. The Luna's seat was smaller but no less magnificent, worked with silver moons and running wolves. It had been empty for 5 years. The council was already assembled. 7 alphas from the subordinate territories, plus the advisors and nobles who formed the core of Blackwood governance. They stood in clusters, whispering among themselves, their eyes tracking Kale and Elara as they walked the length of the hall. Lord Vance stepped forward. He was older than Elara remembered, his gray beard longer, his shoulders slightly stooped. But his eyes were sharp as ever. Your Majesty. He inclined his head to Kale, carefully ignoring Elara. We received your message. I must confess, we were surprised. The reports of your death were greatly exaggerated. Kale's voice carried through the hall, strong and commanding despite the wounds still healing beneath his clothes. As you can see. Indeed. Vance's gaze flickered to Elara, then away. And your companion? My betrothed. Elara Ashford, last daughter of the Luna bloodline. Kale paused just long enough for the gasps to ripple through the crowd. The woman who saved my life when my own brother tried to murder me. The hall exploded into chaos. Questions flew. Accusations. Demands for proof, for explanation, for something that made sense of the impossible claims their king had just made. Through it all, Elara stood silent, watching, waiting. She'd spent 5 years learning to read people. Learning to see beneath the surface, to spot lies and hidden agendas and dangerous intentions. Now she let those skills work, scanning the crowd for reactions that didn't fit. There. Lady Gideon, the Treasury Minister, whose face had gone pale at the mention of Tyron's treachery. And there, Commander Thorne, whose hand had moved toward his sword before he caught himself. They knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. They were part of it. Kale was speaking again, laying out the evidence of his brother's betrayal. The letter from the mysterious M. The silver arrows recovered from the scene. The testimony of the villagers who'd seen the Blackwood hunters searching for a body that was supposed to be dead. The council listened. Some with horror. Some with skepticism. Some with carefully concealed fear. This is circumstantial at best. Lady Gideon's voice cut through the murmurs. You claim Prince Tyron attempted to assassinate you, yet he's conveniently dead. You claim he murdered the Queen Mother, yet you offer no proof beyond a single unsigned letter. And you bring before us a woman who abandoned her obligations 5 years ago, asking us to accept her as Luna based on, what? A convenient story about threats and bloodlines? Convenient. Elara heard herself speak, her voice steady and clear. You think it was convenient, Lady Gideon? Spending 5 years hiding in a cabin in the wilderness, raising a child alone, watching over my shoulder every day for hunters who might have been sent to finish what Kale's mother started. I think, Gideon said coldly, that a woman who runs from her commitments is capable of inventing any story that serves her purposes. Then let me offer you something that doesn't require trust. Elara stepped forward, and she felt Kale tense beside her, ready to intervene, ready to protect. She touched his arm, a gentle reassurance. I can do this. Let me. She addressed the council directly. You want proof of my bloodline? The Luna Ashford's white wolf hasn't appeared in 7 generations. I shifted for the first time 3 days ago, in defense of my mate and my daughter, and killed half a dozen of Tyron's hunters in the process. Any wolf here is welcome to verify my coloring if they doubt my word. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. White wolves were legend. Unmistakable. You want proof of Tyron's treachery? Elara continued. Then ask yourselves who benefited from Kale's supposed death. Who was positioned to take the throne? Who had been building alliances and cultivating support for years while your king was distracted by grief? Grief you caused, someone muttered. Grief his mother caused. Elara's voice sharpened. Queen Helena came to me on the morning of my mating ceremony and threatened to murder my 12-year-old sister if I went through with the bond. She gave me 1 hour to disappear. So I disappeared. I've spent 5 years protecting my sister, protecting my daughter, protecting myself from a threat I believed came from the crown itself. I didn't know it was just one twisted woman acting alone until 3 days ago. Silence. Absolute silence. Then, from the back of the crowd, a new voice spoke. She's telling the truth. The wolves parted. A young woman walked forward, tall and lean, with auburn hair and eyes the same gray-green as Elara's own. She wore servant's clothing, plain and unremarkable, but she moved like someone who'd been trained to fight. Elara's heart stopped. Marin? Her sister smiled, a fierce, sharp smile that held 5 years of secrets. Hello, Elara. I've been waiting for you. The story came out in pieces. Marin had known about the threat almost from the beginning. Not because Helena had told her, the old queen had been careful about that, but because Marin had been watching. Listening. Gathering information the way she'd been trained to do since she was old enough to understand that knowledge was power. I was 13 when I figured it out, she said. They'd retired to a private chamber, just the 3 of them, Elara, Marin, and Kale. Lily was being watched by a trusted nursemaid, surrounded by guards who answered only to the king. I overheard Helena talking to one of her agents. Giving orders about surveillance on the healer's sister. It didn't take long to understand what she'd done. Why didn't you come find me? Elara's voice cracked on the question. I thought you were in danger. I thought I was in danger. But so were you. And running away wouldn't have solved anything. Marin's gray-green eyes were steady. So I did something else. I made myself useful. Worked my way into positions of trust. First in the Eastern Territories, then here in Blackwood. By the time Tyron started making his moves, I was already embedded in his household. You've been spying on him. For 2 years. Documenting everything. His meetings with council members. His communications with outside allies. The poison he used on his mother, I watched him mix it myself. Marin's jaw tightened. I would have moved sooner, but I needed to know the full extent of the conspiracy. And I needed Kale alive to act on the information. Kale had been silent through most of this, listening with an expression Elara couldn't read. Now he spoke. You let my brother continue his schemes. Let him poison my mother. Let him try to kill me. All because you were gathering evidence? I saved your life. Marin's voice was sharp. Who do you think sent that letter? The mysterious M? That was me. I'm the one who compiled the evidence, who identified the suspects, who made sure it reached you before Tyron could strike. If I'd moved too soon, he would have covered his tracks. You would have confronted him with nothing but suspicions, and he would have turned the council against you. And the assassination attempt? I didn't know about that until it was too late. Tyron kept his strike team separate from the rest of his network, a failsafe in case someone like me was watching. Marin's expression flickered with something like guilt. I sent riders to intercept them, but the storm nearly killed me. And my sister saved you. Marin met his eyes without flinching. The way I always knew she would. If she ever had the chance. The silence stretched between them. Elara looked at her sister, really looked at her, for the first time in 5 years. The girl she remembered had been soft, sheltered, innocent. This woman was none of those things. This woman had spent half a decade playing a deadly game, risking her life to bring down a conspiracy that threatened everyone she loved. You could have told me, Alara said quietly. No. I couldn't. Helena had watchers everywhere. Any communication between us would have been intercepted, and we'd both have been killed. Marin's voice softened. I wanted to. Every day, I wanted to. But keeping you in the dark was the only way to keep you safe. So you let me believe my sister was in danger. Let me spend 5 years living in fear. Yes. No apology. No excuse. Just the truth. And I'd do it again. Because it worked. You're alive. Kale's alive. And Tyron is dead. The trial lasted 3 hours. With Marin's evidence, documents, testimony, even a vial of the poison that had killed Queen Helena, the council had no choice but to accept the truth of Tyron's treachery. Lady Gideon and Commander Thorne were arrested as co-conspirators. Others who had supported Tyron's claim were given the choice between exile and execution. Most chose exile. By sunset, Blackwood territory had a new council. New alliances. And a king whose position was stronger than it had been in years. There's one more thing we need to do, Kale said, as the throne room finally emptied. Alara stood beside him, exhausted but steady. The Luna's throne was still empty, waiting. The mating bond. We started it 5 years ago. We never finished. He turned to face her, and his golden eyes held everything he'd never stopped feeling. The moon will be full tonight. We could complete the ceremony. If you want. If I want. She almost laughed. I've wanted nothing else since the night I ran. Every full moon, I stood outside my cabin and felt the pull of something incomplete. Something missing. You could have found another mate. Started over. No. I couldn't. She reached up, touched his face with fingers that still remembered every line of it. There's only ever been you. There only ever will be. The ceremony took place in the ancient clearing where Blackwood wolves had been mating for 1,000 years. The full moon hung overhead, heavy and silver, casting the forest in shades of pearl and shadow. The pack surrounded them in a wide circle, hundreds of wolves in both forms, witnesses to a bond that should have been completed half a decade ago. Lily stood at the front, held by Marin, watching with those golden eyes that were so much like her father's. Kale spoke the words first. The old words, the binding words, spoken in a language that predated human speech. Alara answered him in kind, her voice steady despite the trembling in her heart. When the time came, she shifted. Her white wolf rose like moonlight given form, massive and radiant, ancient power singing through every fiber of her being. Kale's black wolf met her, equally magnificent, equally fierce. They circled each other once. Twice. And then, moving in perfect synchronization, they marked each other's throats with teeth that drew blood but did not wound. The bond slammed open between them, not the tentative connection she'd known before, but something vast and complete. She felt Kale's heartbeat as her own. Felt his joy, his relief, his overwhelming love. Felt 5 years of separation dissolve like morning frost in sunlight. Finally, his voice whispered through the bond. Finally, finally, finally. Yes, she answered. Finally. When they shifted back to human form, the pack howled. Later, in the chambers that were now theirs, Alara stood at the window and watched the moon begin its descent toward the western mountains. Kale came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. She leaned back into his warmth, feeling his breath against her hair, his heartbeat steady against her spine. What are you thinking about? He asked. Everything. Nothing. She smiled. How strange it is, to be here. After everything. Strange good or strange bad? Strange, right. Like this was always where we were supposed to end up. We just took the long way around. He pressed his lips to her temple. I spent 5 years hating myself for losing you. Wondering what I did wrong. What I could have done differently. And now? Now I understand. Sometimes the path isn't straight. Sometimes we have to lose everything before we can find it again. His arms tightened around her. You saved my life, Elara. Not just in that cabin, all of it. Knowing you were out there somewhere, even when I thought you'd abandoned me, it kept me going. Kept me fighting. Kept me from becoming the monster my grief wanted me to be. She turned in his embrace, facing him. The mark on her throat, his mark, fresh and healing, pulsed with the bond between them. You saved my life, Kale whispered against her mark. Elara lifted her hand to his face, traced the lines of exhaustion and pain and hard-won hope. You saved mine first, she answered. You just didn't know it. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.